Hey guys, this is Copycat with a basic guide to World of Logs here. I'm going to be comparing my DPS to some of the people who ranked to just give a basic demonstration on World of Logs. So I'm already logged into my guild in World of Logs, but the first window that I'm going to open up is the Dragon Soul rankings for the 25-man heroic Ultraxian fight. So I'm going to open that in another tab, and then I'm going to access my main guild logs. So I can go to Realms, check out my realm here, and under my guild, I'll get my same total logs as I would if I just clicked on here. So I'm going to look at our last 25-man Dragon Soul raid. Now this first screen with the dashboard on the full report doesn't give us a whole lot of information, but it can give us some of the dispel breakdowns and some of the interrupt breakdowns. What we're most interested in is probably going to be our damage done analysis and our healing done analysis, so we're going to start there. Now this is across the full raid, and I want to just look at Ultraxian to compare my most control fight against some of the best in the world. And now we have a graph of just our damage on the Ultraxian fight, with some of our top DPS checked here. So I'm going to click on my name. So now we have just my damage dealt here, and if I go to damage by spell, I can see all of my damage ranked by the percent of my total damage that it did, as well as the number of times that it's hit and crit, and my dot up times here. So this is the first major tool that I'm going to use to compare my DPS. So heading back to our other tab here, I can click on just the specific shadow here, and get the top rankings of just the Shadow Priests on the Ultraxian fight. Now I'm going to look at Bubbles today, and we get the same breakdown of his guild on Ultraxian. So I'm just going to look at Bubbles and his damage by spell here. And now we can start comparing. So if I look at the distribution of damage, he did 23% with Mind Blast, 21% with Mind Spike, and 17% with Mind Flay. And if I look at my log, I did about 22% with Mind Blast, and then it looks like my Mind Flay and my Mind Spike damages were reversed. I have 21% and 19%, and Bubbles has 21% and 17%. So that's something that I want to look into when I'm analyzing my logs. The second major thing that I want to look into as a Shadow Priest is my uptime on my dots. So if I look at Bubbles' uptime, he has about 80% uptime on his dots, and in my log, I only have about 75% uptime on my dots. So that's another thing that I'm going to look into. The last thing that I can critically analyze here is the number of times I cast my major cooldowns in the fight. So Mind Blast is an 8-second cooldown, and I cast mine 33 times over 4.5 minutes. And Bubbles cast his 22 times over 2 minutes and 50 seconds. With a little math for the cast time and cooldown of Mind Blast, it looks like Bubbles only had Mind Blast off of cooldown for 4 seconds over the course of the fight, which is really good. And if I look at my log, I had Mind Blast off of cooldown for about 20 seconds over the course of the fight. As Mind Blast is one of my highest DPS spells, I want to see if I can cast it more often. I want to look a bit more into my dot up times compared to Bubbles. So if I go to Buff Details and Buffs Cast, I get this uptime percentage part here. And if I click on this pound sign, my dot duration comes up on this graph. So if I look at all my dot uptimes for this fight, we can see that I have pretty consistent uptimes on my dots here. And if we compare it the same way with Bubbles, it looks like he has really similar uptimes as well. Now the biggest difference that I see in our uptimes is that he has these 2 holes here, which is where the Shadow 4-set burst rotation comes in, and we pull our dots off, and I have 3 of these. Now this is due to the difference in duration of the fights. I had a longer fight, so I'm going to have more time to get my cooldown rotations off. This also means that I have a higher percent of the fight spent within my burst rotation, so my dot up times are going to be a little bit less, which is what we saw in the damage by spell. Now these dot up times are pretty straightforward and clean, but if we look at a little bit more of a convoluted fight like War Master Blackhorn, and do the same with the buffs cast, and put those up, we can see that there's a lot of overlap where I'm dotting on multiple targets. And if I use this arrow over here, it splits up my dot up times by target over the course of the fight. This is a totally different DPS scenario to the Ultraxian fight, so I'm going to compare my dot up times against Bubbles as well here. Going back up to the top and checking out his War Master Blackhorn fight, buffs cast, and his Vampiric Touch up, and the drop down. I'm looking at these clusters of dots to see how similar they are to mine, and they're actually looking pretty close. Looking at my dot uptimes, I have 75% on 2 of my dots and 60% on the other dot. And looking at Bubbles, he has just over 70% on 2 of them and 62% on the other one. So it looks like my major dot uptimes are doing alright. I'm going to head back to my log just to demonstrate a couple more things. So if I want to see the breakdown of what I've dealt damage to, there's 2 ways I can do that. The first is damage by actor. So looking at this, I can see all of the percents of things that I've dealt damage to on this fight, and all of the percents of things that I've taken damage from. The other way we can look at this is in the drop-down box again, on Analyze Damage Done. And if I go to the Target drop-down box and click on Goriana, I get to see the breakdown of who is damaging Goriana the most. Now this is great for fights like Spine, where you need to make sure that all of your raiders are pulling their weight on the burst DPS for the adds. The last thing that I want to show is how to analyze a specific part of a fight, and I'll do that in a healer context. So if I go back to Warlord Zonal's kills, and I analyze healing done, I'm going to use these buttons on the side to give me a little more information on those graphs, and I'm specifically going to use Show Creature Deaths. So this is where the adds die in the Warlord Zonal's fight, and there's going to be some spike healing around when those adds are up. If you pay attention to the healing distribution here, as I select a section where there's a lot of spike healing, and I set page to that selection, the distribution of healing is going to change, because we've truncated the logs just to this time section of the fight. And if we click on one of the healers here, and go to his healing by spell, we can analyze his breakdown of heals that he's used. This is another tool that we can use to compare specific damage and healing demands in specific parts of fights. That's all I have for my basic guide on World of Logs, and when you're ready, check out the advanced guide.